Lorgar, Bearer of the Word, starts with a preface called The Embers. We open on Corforon leading a bunch of named jerk marines, not immediately important enough to remember, through a building called the Tower of Infinite Lords. They're a relatively small formation called the Ashen Circle in the Emperor's 17th Legion, the Wordbearers. Their primary task is to eradicate heretical culture wherever they find it, and so, when they storm in, they do what Space Marines do best. They redecorate the interior with the interior of the current residence. After the carnage, Corforon brushes off another named character who joined them because he's not a part of their super special little club, before they enter the inner sanctum full of heresy. Blocking off the entrance, Cor moves inside and meets a bunch of old heretics trying to save relics before fleeing. Cor stops them, they exchange secret handshakes, and then he tells them he's there to save them, before pulling out a gun and saying, yeah, well, not really, and killing one as proof that they died. Truly a shocker, the first chapter ends with Corforon being a dick. Chapter 1, Revelation. It starts by giving a long spiel about time and how days are super long. A day on Colchis is a little over 7 hours on Terra. Anyway, after that we learn Colchis is hot, and it generally sucks to be there. It's like a mix of Dune and Borderlands with its terrible wildlife and ancient vaults of tech treasure, respectively. The first main characters we meet are these lovely, humble outcasts, but they don't really matter as soon they meet up with a caravan headed by Corforon. Alongside him, we also meet one of the other few people worth remembering, Nairo. He's a slave with a secret, and not the kind you pay to whip. I mean, maybe. Besides him, Corforon's posse is filled with devout guards from all across the world. Chapter 2. Corforon, and if I haven't made this clear, he's a preacher leading a congregation caravan, is giving a sermon to the caravan he just met. Being a religious man in these unforgiving deserts, he starts to look a little nervous at Corforon's words. And he picks up on that. Like a hawk 1,000 feet up, he sees the pickled herring betwixt my grandpappy's salty cheeks and dives right in. Under Cor's gaze, the man wilts like a bitch and shows him his bald, skinny, supple secret. The titular Lorgar. Chapter 3. He blinds Cor with a glare from his Krillin-esque haircut. He promises not to do it again, but Cor knows if it can blind Cell, it can raise hell, and he takes that boy under his wing and kills the family outright. I may have forgotten their names, but they named Lorgar, and he honors them by keeping it. Cor gets money symbols in his eyes when he sees Lorgar, but replaces money with literal hellfire, as he believes if guided right, he can use Lorgar to get back to the main religious city he was kicked out of, Veridesh, and replace its placid, moderate voices with a return to tradition, where they can create works that rival the Daemon Kulaba, like the gods intended.
I better watch my step. If I make one wrong move, he'll turn me inside out and hang me out to dry.
Chapter 4. This starts out with Lorgar being totally cool with his family, which saved him as an infant from this disgustingly painful desert, being slaughtered to every man, woman, and child. You know, because his adoptive daddy spoke purdy and with conviction. That's it. So in the future, if you ever feel bad or sorry for Lorgar in any way, don't. He only gets a little of what he deserves when he gets assigned to bunk with the slaves, specifically Nairo. A little later on, while Lorgar watches the last of his family get slaughtered, Nairo whispers to him like a schoolboy so the guards don't spank his ass. Lorgar informs him that he has super hearing and super memory, in effect leaving Nairo permanently shit-shy for the rest of his life. The last thing of note is Cor giving a sermon where he ironically tells everyone there to be Lorgar's teacher, foreshadowing his near potential demise. God, I wish it was true.
dance with the devil by the pale moonlight.
Chapter 5. Excited for his first lesson, Lorgar pops his head into Corfron's cabin, where he sees him seemingly studying the Slaaneshi texts a little too intently. Cor, shock-cocked and blocked, slams the book closed and screeches at him to knock the door! Cor then makes the first of many mistakes when he hurts his hand after mistaking Lorgar for a medieval peasant and backhanding his steel and force skull for asking to learn how to read. After a day of learning Lorgar some smarts, Cor gives him a pop quiz, and in a stunning indictment of the public school system, Cor has Lorgar lashed for rote memorization rather than understanding the text. I just want to pause this and say how brave it is for the author to take this stance on corporal punishment in schools. I second it. The more flogging of nerds in public, the better. After his beating, Lorgar whines and cries to Nairo while he humble brags about his superpowers, making Nairo dream about the potential good Lorgar could bring. Lorgar, adding racism to his laundry list of descriptors, tells Nairo he's articulate for a slave and asks him what he used to do. Nairo let him know that he used to read edgy books to kids in school like 1984 and To Kill a Mockingbird, and got banished for his controversial views. He workshopped the speech to Lorgar on Reddit beforehand, and he felt pretty good about how it came out. After he wrapped up, he tipped his fedora and walked out without another word. He had to go post on Our Teacher Wins about his new pupil. Chapter 6. Well, the entirety of Chapter 6 is Cor talking to Ixada, his primary convert and chief ass cracker, with Ixada telling Cor that that boy ain't right, and Cor telling him, duh, but that they need his goofy ass to retake Constantinople. Chapter 7. Nairo plots with the other Reddit mods to get their hands on Lorgar's young, soft, supple mind, and clear out when Cor the Janny comes out the side smiling at the smell of his own farts. Lorgar learned more, got beat more, and became a huge lad. Lorgar learned new languages, and Nairo, like a respectable authority figure, told Nairo to keep it a secret and only share it with him and his Discord friends. Ooh, this sounds safe. In contrast, Cor taught Lorgar how to pwn the religious moderates of the city with facts and logic. Soon after, Lorgar wanted to get a pump to show off his tan, so he helped the slaves with some of their work. I'm flexing, I don't know if you can tell. Check it. Cor did not think this was very cash money, and, I'm quoting directly here, said,
"Helping slaves is neither based nor red-pilled."
Quick editor's note. While in character, this diction did throw me off a little bit until a second reading. After beating the lazy slaves, Cor had Lorgar sign terms and conditions with the Chaos Gods. And like a mother from the hood, after having Lorgar make peace with his god, he beat his ass anyway, harder than the rest, with a GameCube controller while his friends were over. Don't ask me how I know. Don't ask me how I know. Don't ask me how I know. Chapter 8. The caravan finally was forced to resupply, and Lorgar, wanting to show off his one meal a day and hair-based toys to the other kids, excitedly waited on deck. Cor jealously grabbed Lorgar like an Austrian sister wife and threw him below deck where he couldn't be seen. In doing so, Cor saw Lorgar's barely marked back. Later, he called Ixada to him, with the intention of gaslighting and negging him until he admitted he was going easy on Lorgar. Cor went so hard that he unintentionally evoked a power greater than the gods, Celine Dion. I'll be honest, I don't remember this joke. I wrote it a while ago, but it's here now. After looking Ixada in the eye, giving him a firm handshake, and nodding, he confirmed he was legit. Cor had to upgrade to the Ghetto Mom's second means of attack. Cor pulled down the bar that held up the drapes, and Ixada beat Lorgar for the audacity of not getting his ass whipped hard enough the first time. Ask me how I know. Wait, don't ask me how I know. Chapter 9. Traveling through Girlboss Canyon, they made their way to the sands that slay. Lorgar seemed to work as a totem, as not one man aboard was cancelled throughout most of their journey. All the while, they kept an eye out for the giant space worm from Dune. There's no joke here. Lorgar is just on Chaos Arrakis, I guess. Not too long into the canyon, Kor even let Lorgar help out around the caravan. How nice. What? He chipped in himself? Whew, self-preservation's a hell of a thing. Meanwhile, Nairo tried to worm-tongue Lorgar against Kor Pharan while they worked. But Lorgar, reverse Uno'd Kor using Lorgar by asking what Nairo wanted to use him for. Chapter 10. Kor thinks about entering a cursed region guarded by the biggest, floppiest, throbbiest king worm on Colchis. By this point, Lorgar is about 3 to 4 years old, but he's a pillarman of a physical specimen. I mean, he is jacked and svelte. Now keep that in mind for what's to come. Oh, our Kor Pharan. You know him, he's getting to that age where his biological clock is starting to tick, and he looks over at Lorgar, and through their daily tutoring sessions, he sees more of a son in him. And, unfortunately, so does Lorgar. But Lorgar, being the son of Kor Pharan, uses those feelings to manipulate him, and tries to read Kor Pharan's old demon tomes. Now here's something that seems a little off. One would think that Kor Pharan would praise the Tzeentchian cunning and reward his Slaaneshi-like manipulation. But what we need to understand and remember is that being an asshole is only a virtue when you do it to others, not when it's done to you. And as one can imagine, Kor did not take this well. Chapter 11. Kor called Exada to do what he does best, but he and the rest of the boys were talking, and, they thought it was slightly less than prudent than to beat down the son of a god. Kor Pharan was many things. Being a punk bitch was not among them. Even as they fought and beat his ass and put a noose around his neck, Kor Pharan read long and hard the entire time. Ironically, the same impotence that led to the rebellion against Kor Pharan was the same force that ended it. Ooh, unfortunately, Exada and crew fell victim to one of the classic blunders, the most famous of which, of course, is never announce that you have information that would lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton, but only slightly less well known as this: never go against the quiet kid when daddy issues are on the line. Lorgar proceeded to, as the kids say, go psycho mode, and literally rip many of the would-be traitors limb from limb, like he was trying to recreate a panel from Invincible. A quick aside, what would happen if Kor was killed before Lorgar came back on deck? It's food for thought. Chapter 12. Kor, ever the consummate party planner, really wanted to keep Lorgar a secret. So like a passive-aggressive girlfriend, he told Lorgar without saying that he really wanted those who got away killed so they couldn't report back to the big church about Lorgar's existence. Lorgar, taking after his real daddy in craftsmanship, did a little arts and crafts before leaving, making his first of many iconic maces out of the junk drawer parts, pipe cleaners, paper clips, and fuselages. From there on out, the slaves quietly itch and scratch to get weapons, while Kor reasonably stays in his room after nearly being killed. There, he realizes not taking advantage of the hyper-loyal universal translator to go through his ancient tomes because of his ego was a catastrophic mistake. Chapter 13. Kor starts this chapter by setting the mood music, lighting candles and pouring some Epsom salts for his toaster bath, before Exada and Nairo break down his door and inform him that Lorgar's been sighted. Oh boy! Kor's emo phase luckily lasted shorter than ours, and returned to his jovial, he returned to how he was before, alright? When Lorgar finally made it back, one of the two things had happened. A. Kor put aside his ego for something bigger than himself, and made Lorgar into the new bearer of the word because he thought he had matured enough that it was, his turn to lead. Or B. Kor knew that his remaining grasp of control held on by a thread, and now that Lorgar was a hero, he was the only one people would actually want to follow. And so, being as shrewd as Kor is, he granted him his books and titles, knowing Lorgar would mostly still defer to Kor's authority, as well as being able to use Lorgar for the wisdom and power within the tomes that he couldn't read before. The cynical may pick B, but we all know everyone's good at heart, right? Who's to say which is true, right? Dromonarchia. Just a quick catch-up, since the book doesn't say so. Monarchia is this beautiful city on a conquered planet by Lorgar, which was all made in its most regal splendor to honor the God King Emperor. And so the Emperor just straight up levels it and blows it up. Has Gilliman do it as a, hey, this is what you should do, follow your big brother sort of thing. Anyway, the chapter starts with Kor walking in on Lorgar, sweaty, stinking goon cave, aboard his ship, literally beating his meat tattered, red, and raw. And I gotta say, even at my most hormonal, I can't say I've done that after my dad yelled at me. With a bowl of ashes from his pappy's lesson on Monarchia, he proceeds to show Kor the angstiest 13-year-old thing in the Horus Heresy. He has servitors perform the Primarch equivalent of scratching yourself with a Bic lighter hot paper clip and that little S symbol. You know the one. Lorgar, in his edgy sad state, on one hand gives in to the Emperor's demand to stop worshipping him as a god, and on the other, asks Kor, without asking, gee, he learns quick when he's beaten, to start setting up cults to the Chaos Gods, and is the first act of betrayal to the Emperor. Kor responds like a desperate friend zone guy whose simpet looks over after being dumped with a, I really don't want to be alone right now, look, while Kor is mentally telling himself to calm down. We see our first appearance of 40k Kramer. Boo. Book 2, Chapter 1. Kor's promotion of Lorgar was more of a lateral move for him. Sure, Lorgar got all the praise and adoration that Kor never got, but Kor was now able to pawn off all of his work to Ixada and still control Lorgar from the background. It was a win-win-win. Lorgar had read through and translated Kor's ancient tomes, but felt no closer to understanding the powers. And like a young executive stressed out to the breaking point, he had the Primarch equivalent of smelling toast. He heard music, stroked out, and seized like a fish, really. After he finished, he had told Kor that the powers had spoken to him. But there were no snakes, nor speaking in tongues involved, so reasonably, Kor had a hard time believing him. Lorgar starts babbling about a large golden figure with eagle wings, and Kor is just pretty sure he hit his head, since, to his admission, his bell is still ringing with music. Not one to let an opportunity go to waste, he tells Lorgar that he needs to take over the No-Kor Club and become the archpriest of the Godsworn. Lorgar was surprisingly okay with being the new Big Les, but he couldn't do it right away. Lorgar had been on a huge Charleston Heston kick and really wanted to perform the hit musical Stop the Planet of the Apes, I Wanna Get Off. But after learning that even as the bearer of the word, he couldn't get the rights to perform Dr. Zaius, and that Kor's caravan was still 3 monkey costumes too short, he had to settle for freeing a bunch of slaves instead. Kor, having a lot of money wrapped up in cotton futures, was not too keen about freeing slaves, but one threat from the new Big Les about seeing a burning bush one way or another had Kor relent, and sent for some shears. Chapter 2. On the way to go free slaves, Kor got into a shouting match with another priest, with a ferocity that could only be summoned by religious nerds or people who defend the DC cinematic universe. Now, Kor made a comment about Henry Cavill, and shots were flying. Kill, kill, kill happened, Lorgar pops some screaming broad in the face, murder, 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 Lorgar nearly dies, Kor and slaves run into gunfire to help, yada yada yada. Chapter 3. Naira ran in, forgetting this isn't a COD 2 lobby, immediately gets shot, and then needs Lorgar to save him. Chapter 4. Many men died, and that was a sacrifice Kor was willing to make, because now they were at the mine. People, however, all went into the underground bunkers and did not want to debate religion with the priests. That would not stop these sand Mormons. And so, Lorgar grabbed a bullhorn and started reading out a script he had written for a video essay, Why Being Bald is Good Actually and Having Hair is Problematic. After 3 days and only a quarter of the way through, the masters just kicked the slaves out so he'd shut up. Chapter 5. Lorgar's religious gang became more official with titles and club jackets, so when new potential members came, they would know their place. A rep for the new members came to Lorgar asking for food and water. He replied with, what do I look like, Jesus? Standing there looking like Jesus. A little while later, Lorgar had another seizure and Kor was just grabbing the leather piece for him to bite on when he sprang up. He told him of this terrible dream where he mistook visions of the Golden God and his buddy Chet for himself and Kor, and gave Kor more and more power and influence until he made everyone's lives a living hell. Kor patted him on the back, telling him it was just a dream, that he needed to rest up before they went to Veradesh, so Lorgar can be a god king and Kor can be a lord. Lorgar agrees and lays back down before Kor whips around with thriller eyes. Chapter 6. Lorgar wants to go back to the Arrakis Desert, while Kor, still suspicious on whether he was reading Slaaneshi texts or Dune again during his private study sessions, thinks it's a waste of time. When they get to the Arrakis region, they see massive moving humps in the sand. The King Worm. Shirtless, gold, and glistening, he told all the people to spread out, while he grabbed his thick hammer and charged toward the turgid, sand-spewing worm. Quickly, it subsumed the muscular demigod, but no son of the Emperor, spoilers, would lose to something massive, moist, and throbbing. Ask Gilliman. After some quick thrashing around inside, the king worm collapsed in a dead, tired heap and spit out Lorgar, totally wiped and covered in goo. Sure, some of his fat sloshed off with his skin, exposing raw muscle to the world, but what'd you expect without a prophylactic? Anyway, in a totally understandable fashion, he erects a giant sign to his conquest, telling everyone where he'll be for a good time. Chapter 7. Lorgar and company made their way to the City of Grey Flowers, while Nairo tries to guilt-trip Lorgar about his potential life as a back-broken rice farmer. Kor spurgs out in paranoia after being kicked out of the city years ago. Because of this, he takes on the name 4Charon to dupe his religious rivals. He's thinking. This disguise was to no avail, because as soon as they entered, they were met with several hundred armored people who made a beeline straight for them. The cannon-mounted war gear at their backs were a guarantee that there was not a single unsoiled pair of pants among the congregation. In typical Kor fashion, he immediately started screaming,
Am I being detained? Am I being detained? I'm not driving. This is a churchmobile. I'm traveling.
Confused, never having dealt with a sovereign citizen before, she asks for Lorgar and brings the bodies of the leaders of the city. Brotherhood. The chapter opens showing the word-bearers doing what all good guys do, burning a lot of books. Soon after, an original Marine from Terra really fails to read the Southern Cali vibes of the room and begins to talk about how they need to return to the Imperial Heralds and literally how the Emperor needs to make the word-bearers great again. For his trouble, he gets a bolt to the back of the helm and the rest of the 100 OG Heralds get wiped out. So, all in all, a very word-bearers chapter. Book 3, Chapter 1. Here we have a little time skip. Everyone is comfy cozy in the big black tower in Veradesh. Kor, like every terrible Hollywood parent, is smugly taking every praise of Lorgar as praise for himself. He is listening to one of Lorgar's speeches when something he says makes Kor do a spit take. Lorgar doesn't understand the problem. Barely able to hold back throttling this golden god, Kor explains slowly why declaring that he will spread your new monotheistic religion across the highly polytheistic theocratic world may not make the most friends. Kor, now slightly regretting helping spread a religion totally antithetical to his own, he takes solace in his edgy band of conspirators known as the Dark Heart. Chapter 2. This chapter was more of the same. Kor schemed in paranoia, building up the defenses of the city. While he's away, Nairo rolls a few more ones on his charisma checks with Lorgar against Kor. Kor now finally leaves to go convert the rest of the world to their peaceful ways. By force. Some cultures he can talk no jutsu into converting, others he has to be slightly more aggressive and burn their cultures to the ground! And here's where we see Lorgar's pretty people problems, as right after he reverse decimates a pop, only letting about 10% live, he wanders off, putting on makeup, and cries, and everyone feels super duper bad for general genocide. You know, that being said, a culture worshipping literal demons may have had it coming. I don't know, I'm not with the judge, but I just think, hey, you get a little baby on the altar, maybe a little genocide wouldn't be the worst thing, I don't know. Chapter 3. In the grand Total War map that is Colchis, while Lorgar went city to city conquering and converting, Kor went for the send agent style of play, because of course he did. because it's the worst and he's the worst, and at this point, I'm convinced he can't help it. Anyway, this horrible strat works for him since he's able to appoint bigwigs all across the world and help swell Lorgar's ranks. Meanwhile, Lorgar is getting honored with ego-bloating titles like the Urizen. Nairo is playing Road Stepdad, and is equipped to deal with Lorgar's seizures, indeed Skype calls to the Emperor, as a real first-time dad is to investigating a newborn's unsoiled diaper only to get a shotgun of black doo-doo to the face. The chapter ends with Nairo worrying about the last nut to crack, a city of storm-calling sorcerers. Chapter 4. The chapter opens up on Lorgar sneaking up on Kor in the Primarch equivalent of two kids in a trench coat. For once, and I mean for once, Lorgar is totally right when he calls out Lorgar for breaking his vow to not return until all of Colchis is under the God Emperor's banner. Lorgar brushes aside his breaking of an oath with a question he knows the answer to. He questions Kor about shady edits he's doing to his quoted speeches, but doesn't really care. I mean, I think he knows, but this is just more of Lorgar being a duplicitous to Kor, to himself, and to everybody else. It's just how Lorgar is. Anyway, Lorgar takes a nap, and Kor calls his edgy band back together for their reunion tour after Lorgar's final win, or total loss. Chapter 5. Nairo, not really sure what was going on with Lorgar, was playing up his seclusion and keeping it super secret, like he's taking a personal day and telling everybody to relax, with smoothness of a man who totally knows what's going on, not letting anything slip because he actually has no idea what's going on. When he had heard that Lorgar had returned from the desert, running with the rest of the flock to meet him, he finds a new Chad-like confidence about him. And like a petty high school boy who takes his dorky girlfriend's makeover as a potential threat to their relationship rather than a source of improvement, Nairo doesn't like it. Cut to the battle of the final city. Battle lines drawn, thousands, no, hundreds of thousands, ready and about to die. In front of them, a massive storm, swirling malevolent violence, and it's rushing towards them. Lorgar walks forward and goes Super Saiyan 2. Oh yeah, lightning and all, and says no you to the storm, and it parts like the Red Sea. And that's that. Lorgar batters down the gate by himself, and the people are either killed or converted. Even Exada is like, oh, that's it. Chapter 6. Lorgar and company return to Veridesh as conquering, not so much heroes, but as heralds of God. They come to find out that while they were gone, Kor went through a nesting phase and reorganized the entire city, adding a suburb here, demolishing a secular school there, you know, chess girl things. It may come as a surprise, but despite all the narcissism and megalomania, Kor somehow managed to stay humble despite all the world-conquering thing. He didn't want the glory or the worship, all he wanted was what he had. Near complete control of the church on a unified 100% theocratic planet. It's not much, but it's honest work, and that was enough for Kor. That was, until Lorgar and crew united with him, and Lorgar started hinting at some malicious groups working within the church who still clung on to the old ways, like a shadowy spleen. Kor, after exasperatedly pulling at his collar and stuttering, suggests purges. Yeah, that's the ticket, and that he has a totally cool and legit group that can go do it now, right now. Nairo, watching Kor measure out lengths of rope and asking for his neck size, decides that this is his last chance to speak up and pushes back against the potential killings. This is the point where Nairo drops the ball so hard, so fast, and so repeatedly, you'd think he was dribbling to his own funeral. He mischaracterizes a bunch of interactions Kor had with the biggest pedant in the galaxy, and then, when Kor sucker punches him for his challenge, he, instead of making a logical or emotional argument to a potentially pliable Lorgar, he chooses to close his coffin door on himself by pulling out a knife to a fist fight. Nairo lunges at Kor, and I want to take a moment to remind the audience that the Primarchs have the worst daddy issues in all of the galaxy. So, when Lorgar's father's life is threatened, he decides to kill two birds with one cudgel and show Kor his Gallagher impression by pulping Nairo's head like a squishy slave melon. Editor's note, I think Lorgar goes off on a lot of vibes and intuition, so as unlikely as it was for him to not turn into a monster, I think this was like the one lock-in moment where he does. The galaxy burns. As is true for many of us mere mortals, you never forget your first. And for an extremely sentimental guy like Lorgar, the first world he held down and forced into compliance was the world he'd finish upon. He gathered up his entire legion and made sure they brought every shrine, oath of the moment, purity seal, smash note, and varsity jacket the Emperor left on the Fidelis Rex, all to throw onto one massive breakup bonfire. Kor and fucking Erebus lock eyes and giggle under their breath like little jealous mean girl cliques. The moment passes and Kor starts thinking about the clique and the power dynamics within. Now with the Emperor soon to be replaced with his old faith, what would that mean for him? I'm his right-hand man, right? Bros before upstart gods, right? And then, for a moment, the high school sociopathic scales fall from his eyes. Oh dear God! Did this hyper-charismatic super genius use my ambition as a smokescreen to do every depraved thing he secretly wanted to do while maintaining his holier-than-thou image? What the hell is going to happen to me now that the image is no longer needed? Oh God, I'm just an old wrinkly ballsack in a smelly suit of armor. Oh God, I live on his whim and the winds could change at any second. And the book ends with Kor staring off into flames, having an existential breakdown. The end. Final thoughts. Upon first read, I really thought Nigro had a chance to change Lorgar. But upon further examination, I think Lorgar was going to do whatever he wanted, and to latch on to whichever puppet could help him. I don't think he was destined for evil. Kor definitely helped facilitate that transformation, but Lorgar, just at his core, was a conniving person. And if Kor's ending is to be believed, which is arguable, you never know, for all of Lorgar's talk of wanting the truth, he seems incapable of being honest with himself, as his superego and ego, his pushback on his desires and his counter-arguments to that pushback are all for show, as his subconscious id is really behind the wheel of every decision. Overall, it was a fun book, the first 40k book that got me really invested in the universe. I'd love to know what you think about the book, my thoughts, if you read it, if you came to a different thing. YouTube is as lame as it is for all the things, so like, comment, subscribe. You have to say this nonsense, but that actually would be fun. I reply to an inordinate amount of comments because it's fun, and I do this for the giggles. So thanks for coming. Until next time, see you.